It's a watershed film in the history of cinema, crafted by a master filmmaker in his prime. A secretary steals $40,000 and goes on the run. After a long drive, she checks into a remote hotel run by a man named Norman, whose mother has a domineering grip on her son. Wes and Darling Beat check into the Bates Motel for a review of Alfred Hitchcock's masterpiece, Psycho.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of You the Right Thing. I'm Wes, and I'm joined by Darling Beat once again. Hi, Beat.
Hi, Wes.
How you doing?
I'm good.
That's
Living
good.
the dream, you know.
Living the dream. That's pretty great. I like it. Well, anything exciting happened since the last time we talked? Anything going on in your world that you want to talk about? Or
Well, my computer chair broke, but that's not exciting. That's just tragic.
Oh, no.
But I'll be okay. I'll manage.
Whose fault is it?
The wheels.
Oh, okay. It's not like somebody's fault. Can we find somebody to blame?
Coda. We can blame my cat.
Blame the cat? All right.
Yeah.
If you say so.
Logical.
I'm into it. Cats are evil. Have you seen any new movies in the last however long it's been?
No, I have not.
No. Sounds like you.
Just one we're going to talk about.
I did see a movie since we last talked. I finally got around to seeing Morbius.
How was it?
Terrible. It's every bit as bad as everyone says it is.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
So, Jared Leto is 2 for 2 on bad Marvel characters and DC characters, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I don't know if it's totally his fault. There's just a lot of bad dialogue, and I don't know, the story's not very interesting. It's pretty paint by numbers, which is not great. Yeah, not super into it. So I'm guessing that means you haven't seen any trailers.
I have not.
You have not. It's funny because I'm trying to remember what I just watched. What trailer?
Oh wait, I did watch a trailer.
What
I
would
watched
you
the
watch?
one you told me. The one with the pretentious people.
Oh, The Menu.
Yeah, I finally watched it, and that looks interesting. I will definitely be watching that.
Yeah, the other one looks great. I watched the Prey trailer came out, which is like a prequel to The Predator, and it deals with
What?
the predators hunting Native Americans. It looks really, really cool.
That sounds cool.
And then I saw another prequel trailer. I saw the trailer for the new Hunger Games movie.
There is a prequel for the Hunger Games.
Yeah, it's called
I'm gonna cry.
It's called The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Which is
goodness.
a really cool title. There's no footage in the teaser. It's like all CG stuff to like give you a vibe, but there's no people in it.
No footage yet? Gotcha.
No people, no dialogue, just sounds and music and CG.
Ooh. That makes me really excited because I love the Hunger Games so much. Like the movies and
Yeah.
I didn't read the books, but I did love the movie. I thought it was very beautiful. I've watched it a lot of times.
Yeah, I like the movies too. Oh, something I saw that was weird, or I thought was strange, was Prey, the Predator movie. It's going to be exclusively on Hulu. It's not coming to theaters. Yeah. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, wait. No, that's a TV series. Just kidding. No, wait. Is it?
What? Wait, what?
Andrew Garfield is in a new TV series or movie. Under
the Banner of Heaven? Yeah, it's a series.
Yes.
Yeah,
I want to see that.
He's so good.
I love Andrew Garfield.
Yeah. Then there's a new John Cho movie coming out. called Don't Make Me Go, about a father and daughter. Like, the father's sick, and I don't think he's like completely honest with his daughter about how sick he is, and he like forces her to go on a summer road trip with him. And it looks really sweet and sad and sappy, which is kind of right up my alley.
That sounds tragic.
Yeah, I'm really worried. It's because, you know, my dad died, and you know, fairly young, and you know, I'm pretty susceptible to being quite moved by those kinds of stories. So I'm a little worried about it, but because I'm probably gonna end up crying my eyes out. What's new?
Just walking out the theater, freaking bubbling.
Yeah.
Bubbling.
But yeah. Well, that's all I got. That's all I have. News-wise and movie-wise and trailer-wise. Not a ton to report. So I guess, if you want, we could talk about Psycho. Or we don't have
to.
If we don't want to have to, if you don't want to, I guess. I mean, all right, podcast over.
Now let's get into it.
So, what was I going to say about this? There's going to be... This is going to be a spoiler-heavy conversation. Like, all of our conversations, I'm not worried about spoilers. I'm just saying that, like, we are just going to flat-out ruin the movie. So, if you haven't seen Psycho... the original 1960 Psycho. Don't watch the new one. Pause this, go watch it, and then come back, because yeah, like I said, we're gonna run it. So I'm gonna give the the plot, the quick short paragraph, the one sentence paragraph, and then I'll start asking you some questions, and we'll get into it. So
yeah.
the plot, the really simple plot is: a Phoenix secretary embezzles $40,000 from her employer's client, goes on the run, and checks into a remote motel run by a young man under the domination of his mother. That simple. Such a simple story. Nothing else to it at all. Okay, so the first question, as always, is Beat. Oh man, I'm so nervous. Beat, did you like this movie?
Okay, so if if you don't know, the hotel was the Bates Motel.
Uh-huh.
So I love Norman and his mother and the whole story and the awe factor of it. I love it.
Uh-huh.
But this movie did not tickle my fancy.
Okay. I think this I think this might be one of our best episodes. Maybe our best episode of the two of us. I think this is going to be our best episode yet.
Why? Oh my goodness!
Because I'm hoping I can bring some things to the forefront that will give you an appreciation for things you may not have thought about or realized during the film.
Okay, I love that. I love that for me. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd appreciate that. I did love some of the subtle. I thought the acting was great. Okay. I found Norman to be completely like what I imagined Norman Bates to be, which is like personable on the outside, but psychotic as shit on the inside. Mm-hmm. So for that, I found that beautiful. I think the actor played it so well.
Yeah, Tony Perkins.
Yeah, and I really liked, what's her name? Marion?
I
liked her. I liked Marion. Yeah. Marion.
Janet Leigh.
I loved the way she played her character. I loved it so much. Like, she, like, subtly smiled when she thought she got away with it. Like, I noticed that. And then his little subtle smiles sometimes. And, I don't know, it was just, like, the little facial expressions that like you had to pay attention to. I love that. It's like we're not saying with words what they're thinking, but you could tell. And yeah. I loved that in it.
Yeah. So you know who that is, right? Janet Leigh?
No, I do not.
So Janet Leigh, scream queen of that age, like this is the movie that sort of like people were like, you know, because her scream was the big deal in the film. Oh, yeah. And 28 years later, her daughter becomes the new scream queen of modern horror films. You've seen her in a bunch of slashers, but the notable one is Halloween, and her daughter is Jamie Lee Curtis.
My mouth literally on the floor. I just had to pick it up.
Yeah. So she like
What?
picked up, you know, sort of what her mother had done when she was younger, and then carried on the tradition.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
I did not know that. That is so cool.
Yeah. And she's actually in Halloween H2O, I think. I think she plays like a secretary who gets killed at the beginning.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, pretty great stuff.
That is the coolest fact. I now know.
Well, we got much cooler things. Yeah. So this movie is based on a novel, and the novel's a little bit different. Like Norman is like a 40-year-old, like short, bald, fat guy, who's like, I think super unlikable. And so obviously they changed things, but the novel was inspired by a real serial killer, by the name of Ed Gein. And Ed Gein sort of inspired this partially because of killing young women, and then also preserving them, taxidermying them. I don't know if taxidermying is a word, but that's what I mean. And so it also inspired not just this film, but the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Silence of the Lambs. So they're all sort of inspired by this particular serial killer. So tell me about some of the things that you noticed about the film, some things you liked or didn't like, and then maybe I can fill in some gaps, and then I'll give you sort of the extra trivia and also the subtext of the film.
All right. Well, I've already touched base on like the subtle smiling. Like I really liked when she was driving and she was arriving at the hotel, like right before she's on the highway, and she's just like smirking to herself. And I think that what was running in her brain was her thinking what they're doing right now. I don't think it was actually what they were doing. I think it was her thinking that she got away with it.
Yeah.
And like that's how she feels like their dialogue would have went without her, and her smirk. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Chef's kiss. I loved it so much. It was like just like a very subtle way to say, haha, gotcha, bitch.
Well, and I think
to them.
And I think, you know, I guess I'll just jump into this big subtext thing now since you're bringing it up. I love that you picked up on that. So especially of this era, like Freud and the concept of like the super ego, the ego, and the id were like a really big thing, and a lot of people believe that the house sort of represents the different stages of your mind or whatever. So there's like the upper floor, the mid floor, and then the basement, which represents those three things. But Freud also was really into this this concept of the uncanny. Do you know about the uncanny?
I do not.
So the concept of the uncanny is when you have something that's familiar and it becomes unfamiliar. And then because of that, it's like unsettling. So being in your school after hours, or seeing a teacher at the grocery store, it's like it's familiar, but it's unfamiliar and it's weird, and it kind of makes you a little bit uncomfortable. Uncanny sort of, I guess the concept is sort of like duality, right? Like you have the same thing, the teacher who you see in school and the teacher who you're now seeing outside of school, they're the same thing, but they're different somehow. If that makes sense. So it sort of delves in the concept of doppelgangers, you know, two identical things that are actually different. They're not actually identical, but they seem to be identical. And you see that a lot in horror films, especially older horror films are sort of like based on this kind of idea of doppelgangers, right? So like zombies and werewolves, or you see reflections a lot, especially in older horror films. And you'll see the reflection do something different than what the person's doing. Like it'll like, the person will look away from the mirror, and then the reflection in the mirror is still looking at them, like that kind of stuff.
I love that stuff.
Yeah, so that's sort of the concept of the uncanny, something normal presenting itself as not normal. and then it just like really throws you off. And so you see a lot of examples of this in Marion and Norman. So just right off the bat, I just kind of pointed one out just now. Like their names are really, really similar, right? Their names are almost the same letters, but just not quite there. And Marion's name, I think, is actually Mary or Maria in the book, and they changed it to be a little bit closer to Norman for the film. And most of their scenes when they're together, there's almost always a mirror in the scene that's reflecting Marion. So we don't know that Norman at that stage when you see them together, we don't know what's going on with Norman. We don't know about sort of his dual identity, but we do sort of have been given all of the details of Marion's. So, at the beginning of the film, the very first time we see Marion, she's wearing a white bra and she's carrying a white purse to work. And after she makes that decision to steal the money, we see her in a black bra carrying a black purse. Just sort of like kind of driving home really early on this idea of this like dual, these two dual forces living inside one person.
Yeah, it felt like she like flipped a switch.
Yeah, for sure. So the idea is basically she's dealing with two states of mind pulling at her just like he is. And I think you sort of see that when she's driving, because there are moments when she's hearing the voices where she looks a little concerned, but she ultimately sort of rests or comes to the end sort of being comfortable with this decision that she's made. And that grin that you're talking about, that smile, I think is super, super important. But she goes on this like this journey that changes her, right? That brings out this second identity. So the movie at the beginning is shot at like these long angles, lots of 3/4 shots and full shots and some medium shots, and all of the edits are fades, which are kind of slow and sort of represent the passage of time, and they're really thoughtful and thought out. And as she's driving and making these, like, sort of coming to the conclusion, like hearing the voices in her head, which also voices in her head, hello, she's like working through it and like coming to terms with what it is she's doing and thinking inward. And as she's doing that and she's thinking inward and grasping with these thoughts, the fades stop being fades. They stop fading from shot to shot, and they start just using just fast cuts. So we're losing the concept of the passage of time. Time just moves now. And as that happens, we see the camera starts out, further out on her, like a medium shot, and it gets closer and closer and closer and closer on her as she drives. And as it gets closer and she like moves inward inside her own thoughts, everything outside her changes. It goes from day to night. It goes from clear skies to rain. She just can't see her way out of this anymore. And that's when all of a sudden the motel appears and she pulls over, right? Mm-hmm. And as she sort of explores the, meeting Norman and coming to terms with what she may or may not do, like it sort of implies that maybe she's going to change her mind or not, she ends up getting killed. Like 40 minutes into a movie, like what you think is the main character gets killed. But she doesn't die until she gets what she wants, right? So, and she tells us, again, going back to the very beginning of the film, when she's sitting there in the white bra, she's in the room with her, she's secretly having this tryst with this guy. It's all improper or whatever. And she basically is like, what I want is to have a respectable meal. He brings her a sandwich. They have a close-up shot of the sandwich, and it's not eaten. She hasn't touched her food. And she's like, I want to have a respectable meal, with tables and a picture of my mother looking down on me. And what happens at the hotel? Norman goes and gets her dinner, brings her a sandwich. They sit down. He starts to take it into her room, and he sees the room and realizes that's improper. And so he backs up and has her come into the parlor where it is proper, feeds her a sandwich, just over her shoulder is this house where this mother is looking down on them. It's everything that she said she wanted at the beginning of the film. And that allows her to basically, it's like sort of like seals her fate, right? Am I going too fast? I feel like I'm going like a mile a minute.
No. That was that's something I didn't even think about. That's crazy.
Yeah. So we subtly are being told that Marion sort of has this double identity going on. Norman obviously has a double of himself. It's like him and his mother inside his brain. Marion is also his double. So sort of going back to what you were talking about, like when she's driving and she's thinking about it and she comes to the conclusion that her boss and friends are going to like jump to all these conclusions and things. And she hears the voices in her head. And then she looks right at the audience, looks straight into the camera and smiles. And it's echoed at the end of the film exactly by Norman. It's the exact same thing. Like,
yeah,
I've gotten away with this. I've done this thing. It's a really like interesting sort of exploration about duality and like giving into sort of your impulses, because not just the characters do, but we as the audience do, right? So Hitchcock shot this movie on my favorite lens, which is a 50 millimeter lens, which is the closest lens that simulates the human eye. And he did that because he wanted us to feel like we were actually seeing this through our own eyes, and we were actually like voyeurs in this whole process, right? We're basically peeping Toms on all this stuff that happens. Even Norman does it, right? And we know because the very first shot is like the skyline of Phoenix, and then the camera comes in on this building. We're outside the building, and the camera comes in and then peeks in through a window underneath the blinds, and that's how we get our first view of Marion and sort of this tryst that she's in, and she's, you know, in her underwear and stuff, and you know they've just done unspeakable things. So right off the bat, like Hitchcock makes us voyeurs, and so we participate in the same thing that they're doing, which is giving into our impulses. We could look away, we just choose not to.
That's cool.
Yeah. So okay. So tell me about some of the other things that you noted.
I noted that Marion, when she met Norman, like when they were talking over the sandwiches,
mm-hmm.
she didn't judge him at all. Like, I feel like she didn't, like, with the taxidermy and how fast he was talking and some of the things he was saying, I felt like she was accepting it. Like, she was like, okay, that's strange, but all right, you know?
Yeah, well, he's so charming and innocent. He seems innocent, right? He seems like, you know, the line, there's a line that's the number 56 greatest movie quote, according to the American Film Institute, which is, a boy's best friend is his mother. And
mm-hmm.
there's something so, like, I mean, it's like sad and kind of pathetic, but it's also kind of sweet and innocent at the same time, you know? And it's a little,
yeah, he was giving me whiplash.
yeah, it's a little hard to dislike him, I think. He feels really genuine. I also,
yeah, and that's one of the reasons I loved that scene.
Yeah,
it's just like her accepting what he's saying and, you know, carrying on a polite conversation with a stranger with no notion, like no thought that this is a strange man, you don't know him, you're in the back of a den in a dark motel. Like, there was no sense of safety for her. And she just had dinner with a man.
Well, and like on repeat viewings, like so I guess real quick before I say this, what did you know ahead of time that the mother was really him?
Yes. You
did know. Okay. So like, I'm sure, especially back in the era, it was a big surprise to people. But it's interesting in that scene where he's talking about the taxidermy that he flat out tells her his secret. And he's like, oh, my mother, she's harmless. She's as harmless as these stuffed birds. And it's because he's already stuffed her.
Ew.
Right? Like, it's, I don't know. It's, I think it's just a really special scene. Because not a lot happens, just a lot is told. And normally they're like show don't tell, but in this case, like, it's all subtle, so it's not obvious. And I like a lot of the quotes. Like, there's what does he say? It's not like she's a maniac, a raving thing. She just goes a little mad sometimes. We all go a little mad sometimes. and then he leans back and he goes, haven't you? And like, she can't deny that, right? Like, she, you know, she did go mad. She did go crazy. It's, you know, that's why she's sitting in that room with him.
Yeah, she couldn't like say she didn't. She's like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
One thing that I found really annoying was the PI.
Arbogast?
Yeah, the PI, when he was going and he kept coming back and he was just being relentless. Like, it's like, I know you want to catch your guy, right? I know you want to do that, but doing so, trespassing, going in someone's house and stuff like that, like, that's not okay.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, you know, he doesn't really represent police. And I think especially in horror films, people ask these kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say they're dumb questions because I don't want to insult anyone, but I think it's kind of a dumb question where it's like, why don't they just go to the police? And Hitchcock had an answer for that. And the answer was because the police are boring. So every time you see the police, it's always a slow, kind of boring scene. Even with the sheriff that's following her, it's kind of slow. Like, it moves the story. It's a vehicle to move the story to her, like, changing cars and stuff, but, like, maybe not totally needed. It just kind of slows things down. But the worst is when they're in the police station at the end and they bring in this, like, clinical psychiatrist to, like, explain everything.
Goodness.
And you're just like, ugh. And that was partially done because the studio was like, you have to explain it for the dumb audience members. And also partially to sort of say, like, this is why we can't just have them go to the police. It will be dumb. It will be boring. So, you know, you have to have sort of these characters that are antithetical to doing the right thing. Otherwise, the story becomes boring. So I agree to some extent. Part of me loves Arbogast a little bit. But yeah, I mean, his undoing is going into the house, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like he kind of got what he deserved.
Yeah, he was like asking for it. I know that's not a good statement, but he was pretty much asking for it. He was like, hey, I'm just gonna go in this strange man's house that literally was fumbling over his words, pretty much confessing that he knew something about the money. I'm just gonna go in his house.
Yeah. Well,
uninvited.
So I'll tell you why I actually am kind of okay with it, is that he doesn't belong here in this place. None of them do. Marion doesn't belong there. Even the sister Lila and Sam. Oh, that's another Halloween reference, by the way. Sam Loomis is the doctor in that's constantly chasing Michael Myers in Halloween. Also, the name Loomis was reused because of this movie in Scream, Billy Loomis. But again, sort of showing, you know, right at the very beginning, showing the city and this, like, I guess, symbol of civilization. And then going to the motel where these, like, sort of barbaric acts happen. These people go to civilization, to the rural community, expecting it to still be the civilization that they know. And Norman even talks about how, like, 12 rooms or 12 cabins, 12 vacancies. Another one of my favorite lines. And
yeah.
And then he always tells them, like, oh, you know, it's been pretty slow ever since they moved the highway, and progress moved on without them. So they're living in the past and everybody else is living in the present. And so they're, these characters have moved from what they expect out of a civil society to just stand in a place that's still living in the past, and the barbarism of murdering these people is and stuffing people and keeping them in your basement or whatever is sort of the resolution of that.
Okay.
What else you got? Anything else?
The police, the sheriff.
Yeah.
When her sister went to the sheriff, he was really dismissive and just just because she was a woman, pretty much, any concern or worry that she had was dismissed right away. Like, oh no, you're fine. She won't be there. Yeah, whatever. And that pissed me off.
Yeah, it's sort of unintentionally. I think that's a byproduct of the time, right?
Yeah.
But unintentionally, it becomes sort of the kickoff for the sequel, which they made, I think, 3 sequels to it. Well, they made 2 sequels and a sort of sequel prequel. And Lila, sort of having felt like she wasn't taken seriously and didn't really get the answer she wanted, and was sort of ignored, pushes her own investigation, which kicks off a whole new set of killings in the sequel. So in an interesting way, kind of what you're talking about is the thing that makes the sequel happen.
Okay. You did have me make a note.
Yeah.
Flushing of thy toilet.
The flushing of the toilet. So this is the first film in American cinema to show a toilet flush, and it was considered to be this kind of risque, indecent thing to show, and because
being murdered in the shower is not indecent.
Well, I mean that was a whole thing too, but it was this crude thing that the censors would never allow to happen. So what Hitchcock did was he told the writer to make the toilet flushing integral to the plot. So by her ripping up the paper and putting it there, and then Lila finding the piece later, tied the toilet and what happens with the toilet into the plot of the film. And so they got to show the toilet flush. So just a fun, weird little fact that I wanted to point out.
That is pretty cool.
Did you have any others?
No.
Okay, so I'll just go through some weird trivia about this movie. Having heard all the stuff about duality, does that give you more of an appreciation for the film? Does it make you like it anymore, or change anything, or nothing at all?
I think it does make me like it a little bit more. Just the subtle hints of it, and just the thought process they put into it. I think that's, I love that. I still don't know if I like it though.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. So I knew that some of these older ones are going to be a risk. You're younger than I am, and don't you've exposed yourself to lots of movies. I shouldn't say exposed yourself. You've watched plenty of movies on your own, and I think this is definitely a challenge for you, just as it's a challenge for me in some cases. So I don't expect you to just be I love old black and white movies, just immediately or whatever. Especially these slow burns. You're a kind of a modern horror fan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I get it. The important thing is that, you kind of see it for what it is, and I think you are, which is great. So just a little bit about Hitchcock. Hitchcock was famously an a-hole. He consistently harassed women on his sets. And on this movie, and that was because he wanted to sleep with them. he went around calling Tony Perkins Master Bates constantly. So that's the kind of guy Hitchcock was. But, you know, he's kind of a genius. You know, we're talking about all this subtext, you know, he knew his stuff. Oh, you know, this just reminded me, there's in the scene where they're in the parlor having the dinner, and he's talking about the taxidermy, and they have all these birds. There's like one bird that's over his shoulder, not an owl, it's something else. And it symbolizes like intelligence and wisdom. And then there's another bird over his other shoulder that represents, like, is considered to be like a really stupid bird. Just a real dummy. And again, it's sort of supposed to symbolize these like two parts of Norman, where there's like this kind of dumb innocence and also something like that knows more than it's letting on inside of him, which I think is kind of cool. So Paramount gave Hitchcock like a tiny budget to make this movie. He normally made about $250,000 in 1960 to make a movie, and he deferred his payment to box office receipts, and they thought this movie was going to bomb. Even Hitchcock thought the movie was going to bomb before he heard the music with it, which we'll get to in a minute. He was convinced that the movie was just destined for failure. And then the movie made a bunch of money, and he ended up making $15 million instead of $250,000. So,
jeez,
yeah,
good deal.
Pretty crazy. So that's sort of like a George Lucas kind of thing, where George Lucas was like, "I want you can have the rights to the movie, but I want the rights to the toys for Star Wars." And then he's the billionaire or whatever. So speaking of the score, Bernard Herrmann did this. Did you like the music? I had mentioned I was like, I love this music. How did you feel about it?
I liked it.
Yeah, it's all strings. There's no horns in it. And it was when they put the score to the movie that Hitchcock was like, oh, this is actually going to turn out okay. I'm not doomed anymore. Janet Leigh, after she did this movie, realized how vulnerable women were, like in the shower and stuff. And so after making this movie, she never took a shower again. She only took baths, which is one of those things you hear a lot about people who saw this film. Famously, some dad wrote to Hitchcock and was like, after such and such movie, I can't remember what it was. He's like, my daughter won't take baths, and now that she's seen Psycho, she won't take a shower. He's like, what do I do? And Hitchcock, I guess, the snarky guy, wrote back and was like, just send her to the dry cleaners. So.
Spray her off in the front yard.
Yeah. The score to this is number 4 on the 100 Years of Film Scores by the American Film Institute. I'm just gonna rattle off a few of these AFI things just to kind of give you an idea of sort of how the film community ranks this film. So we talked about the line being number 56. The music score is number 4. Norman Bates is number 2 on the best villains list of all time. And it is number 14 on the 100 greatest films of all time. So it's considered to be quite a little masterpiece. The shower scene. If you had to guess, so a shot is any individual take, right? So like a close up or a medium shot or a low angle shot or a shot from overhead, that's a shot. If you had to guess, how many shots were in the shower scene?
56.
There are 78 shots in the shower scene.
Okay.
It lasts 45 seconds and has over 90 edits in it. Which means
I say, because when I watched it, I noticed how like it cut from like her in the shower to like a different angle to like the knife to like all these different shots where like her foot was showing, her hand on the wall, in a couple different angles. It was just like a different, the blood. So that's why I was like 56. I was like, that seems high enough. Then you come out with 70 something.
78. Yeah. So it cuts on average, more than 2 cuts every second. So it's just constantly, which is pretty incredible. It's definitely like, if you want to study editing, that's a really great example of a way to study editing. So as we're talking about like the blood and the shower, so the shower head, they made a special shower head so he could shoot directly up into the shower and the water wouldn't hit the camera. It's kind of cool. And then the blood is one of these weird phenomenons. It's not really a Mandela effect. I don't buy into Mandela effect for what it's worth. But people are convinced that the blood in the movie was red. Convinced, absolutely convinced that it was red. Obviously, they shot it in black and white, so it wasn't. They used, I think it was called Bosco's, which is a chocolate syrup, to achieve the blood effect in the shower. Just another cool thing that I like about it.
How could it possibly be red?
Yeah, right. But people are convinced. It's kind of like there's one where it's like I think it's All in the Family, which is a TV show, the Archie Bunker show, Archie and Edith. And on the show, Edith dies, and I think it happens all off screen because maybe the actress had already died, and people are convinced that they saw her die, like say something to Archie and die, but it never happened. And so then people, are now super into the Mandela effect. So people think that, it's like an alternate dimension.
See, I don't think the Mandela effect is real. I think a story being so well told that
pervasive.
Your mind can imagine or like feel something that could have happened.
Yeah.
I believe in that.
Yeah, you hear that with movies all the time, movies and TV shows where they're like, I swear this happened, and it just didn't. It just didn't happen. But yeah, so I think that's probably all I have about this film. Just double checking my notes here. Does it make you want to like watch any other films now? Are you like, I gotta watch Texas Chainsaw again? Now that I know it's Ed Gein.
I love Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's the very first horror movie I ever watched.
Yeah.
But I won't be watching it again anytime soon.
I have a great special edition DVD that I don't know if I've told you this before, but the case looks like ground beef. And it's got like a little little slip cover that makes it look like it's cellophane wrapped ground beef. It's pretty good. It's kind of bumpy too. I gotta pull up our wheel real quick to find out what we're watching next. Well, I hope.
That movie literally set me off to like any horror movies, and then I was like, all right, well now I gotta watch something else. Then like the gorier the better.
Yeah. Well, I hope I wasn't like too crazy and too fast. Like, I was so excited that I like realized I was just kind of like rattling through this stuff really, really quickly. I hope it all made sense and was interesting. I don't know if it was or not, but
for me it was interesting. I loved knowing the little facts, like the little just inspiration behind everything. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it's always exciting for me when there's like a real psychological thing going on with a movie, and I get to talk about when we do these more modern films. One, people are some directors and filmmakers will imitate what happened in the past and not really understand why they're doing what they're doing. That's actually a really interesting story. I went and saw a movie. I can't remember what it's called. It stars George Clooney, and it's directed by Tony Gilroy, who for a long time was an assistant director. And then this was his, I think, directorial debut. And so I went to the screening of it, and the director was there, and I asked him, Tony Gilroy, I was like, hey, I noticed in this scene that you like moved in really close on this close-up of this thing that happened. I don't know. I guess I'm going to spoil something here. I was like on a car door before the explosion happened, and I just kind of wanted to know like sort of the thought process and going to that. And he goes, "I did," And I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, I don't even realize I did that.
Oh, goodness.
And I was like, this is an example of somebody who's watched a bunch of great directors do stuff, and he's just copying what they did. Like, he doesn't know why he's doing what he's doing. No offense to Tony Gilroy. He's paid his dues, and he's definitely grown as a director, but that first movie, like, I don't know, man. It really disappointed me to hear him, like, not know why he did something. So I think like there is a case of modern directors doing that kind of thing and not really understanding. And so when we talk about some of these more modern movies, it's difficult to parse through and find some of the psychological aspects of things. So these older movies give, you know, not just because they put a lot of thought into them, but we've had, you know, 40, 50, 60 years to watch Psycho and analyze it. So there's been a lot of people talking about it and books written about it, which also helps me. So I apologize if anybody found it like I was going too fast or was boring. I just was really excited.
He's just a baby. He was excited.
Just a baby. Okay. All right, I'm going to tap this. I'm going to tap to spin the wheel. Here we go.
Something good.
Oh my god. I don't know how you're gonna feel about this.
Oh my god. I quit.
It's giving us another classic horror film. Maybe another one in my top 5.
Well, what is it?
We're gonna watch The Shining.
I'm excited for this though.
It is. Some people find it really boring. I'm gonna warn you now.
God, I'm excited. I'm excited.
It's
okay.
It is one that we can talk about for a bit. I bet. I think it's gonna be like this one, where there's a lot of like background things. One, it's again based on a book, and made by a reluctant director, so it should be interesting. Yeah, so that's exciting. All right, so part of me kind of wish that these had fallen into, you know, October. Although I don't know when these are going to air, so, you know, who knows.
Maybe it's spooky season already and we just don't know it.
Yeah, maybe it is. You're right. Okay, so that'll wrap it up. Is there anything you want to say to the Viewsters before I say goodbye to them?
I love you all.
Oh, I love it.
That's it.
So nice. All right, I love them too. All right, everybody. Until next time, bon cinema.